Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Come in. Hope you had a great lunch. And we need the slides of the songs because we're going to worship now. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Let's sing it, 10,000 Reasons in Ukrainian language. Лине спів до небес, лине до небес, до Бога життя мого. Він за мене страждав, Він воскрес, славлю ім'я Його. Палає обрій новим світанком, а що готує наступний день. Тобі життя моє належить до останку. Тобі співають тисячі пісень. Лине спів до небес, лине до небес, до Бога життя мого. Він за мене страждав, Він воскрес, славлю ім'я Його. Твоя любов, наче сонце сяє, тамує спрагу потік щедро. І кожен день тобі я щиро заспіваю. Для цього маю тисячі нагод. Лине спів до небес, лине до небес, до Бога життя мого. Він за мене страждав, Він воскрес, славлю ім'я Його. Життя мине, в світі все минає, та подих твій, хай оновить спів. Хвали моєї пісня, хай тобі лунає. Навіки вічні тисячі років. Лине спів до небес, лине до небес, до Бога життя мого. Він за мене страждав, Він воскрес, славлю ім'я Його. Славлю ім'я Його. Praise the Lord.
What a beautiful song. I personally think it sounds even better in Ukrainian than English. I'm here to introduce our speakers now, who are shorter than me. I didn't know if I was allowed to move that, but that's good. We're talking about the next generation. And there is a great team here, and many of you have met them already, but there's Louis from Paris, who is a brilliant mathematician, scientist. A lot of us know the family because Emma and Yannick have been around for a long time. Louis will be actually going second, but I thought I wanted to introduce him first because I know Rolan more. He heads up the Young Professional Ministry. He's graduated from the European School of Missions. He teaches mathematics and and internet technology at the European high school level, which is well up there, service intern with Hope, and currently studying theology, which is what about half of you are wondering. Do I need to study theology? And the answer is yes. It's just simply, it's how and where and how you do that, I don't know. But Louis, you're a great example in that area, and I definitely appreciate that. And I look forward very much to hearing you speak and to watching how you interact with your Asian co-teacher. So this is Rolan from the Philippines. I believe you're the one who's traveled farthest to be here. Roland's been a friend for many, many years. We've had a chance to collaborate on different continents, and that's been just an awful lot of fun. What can I say? What really needs to be said? Bachelor of Science, Electrical Engineering, same as my brother, but we don't think of you as an engineer. We think of you as an evangelist, a man of God, and a teacher. Bachelor of Divinity, University of London, honors, master's and doctorate, historical and pastoral theology, with 12 years of combined study of this and ancient languages, not just languages like Aramaic, but languages like Syriac. And you may be one of two people I've ever met who could do that. We're impressed, we're encouraged by your love for the Word and by the books that you've written. So at this time, my friends, and my friend Rolan, thank you so much for your support to me and friendship. It means an awful lot. But let's give a warm welcome as Rolan comes and Louis for this message on the next generation.
There we go. Thank you, Doug, for your kind words. Thank you for the introduction, and really appreciate you so much. You call us higher in so many ways, and you are a great friend to Asia. Good afternoon to everyone. Much obliged for the invitation to speak. I'm honored and thrilled to take on this exciting topic, teaching in the next generation. I'm also very thankful to be co-teaching with Louis, and I'm positive that this afternoon will spur many meaningful conversations. Let's start with this cartoon. Dad says, "Hi, sweetie. How was school today?" "You can read all about it on my blog, Dad." The world has changed and continues to change, and we want to stay current. We don't want to be in the backwaters. We don't want our churches to be left behind. See, everybody grows old. Churches have gotten old. Many denominational churches are dying and closing their doors daily. The majority of churches, even in our movement, have more gray hair and canes and walkers than young people. So we want to do more to ensure not only that our young people know Christ, but that those after us who are shaped or gifted for teaching are connected and involved. Here's our simple outline. Louis will tackle needs and concerns and talk about his context. I'll follow up with principles and opportunities. And our goal is to spark meaningful conversations. Louis, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I feel very, very grateful to be here and to be able to speak to you. Thank you for the organization team. Thank you to Brad and Ann for slipping my name somewhere. Thank you for Rolan for co-teaching with me and for your graceful heart, even though my first draft was not so great and I sent things maybe last minute, but Rolan is super encouraging. It's good, bro, just do this, it's fine, whatever, and super helpful. So thank you very much. Thank you, Doug, for introducing us. And thank you to you guys for persevering in having open ears, open minds, even if it's the last big topic of the weekend. Okay, tomorrow morning we're going to get together for a great service, but this afternoon is kind of the last great session. So thank you for being attentive. Yes, so I will tackle more needs and So, the goal of my presentation is twofold. First, to raise questions as a next gen. So I hope I represent the next gen correctly to all my next gen fellows here. My goal is to kind of just raise questions, to show some concerns, or mostly needs, and just express, maybe what I feel, and hopefully what we feel are needs. And secondly, to share encouragement from Paris. I really feel encouraged by my church in Paris, and I just want to share it with you because it's very good things are going on in Paris, so I'm just going to share that with you guys. I'm very grateful for having this topic as a given topic to me, because in the past 2 or 3 months, as I've been thinking about this, I got to really analyze how my church works, really ask questions to different kind of people, different generations, and to just have a lot of point of views. And it's been really interesting to me, and it's an inspiring topic. Really, it's very hopeful, and I hope I can share some inspiration with you guys as well. Even though it says needs and concerns, it's not a negative section. It's very positive. So let's try and do that. I will tackle 3 topics: the role of a teacher, teachers within the church structure, and training future teachers. My goal is to not do classes on these topics, but to present, what are some needs and maybe concerns, questions, observations, really, from the next gen on these things, and maybe some thoughts or some ideas from Paris. Okay? Are you ready with me? Yes. Okay. For each topic, I will share an observation that I've made in the past couple months, and data from the survey. So I sent out a survey during the summer. I got 150 responses, mostly from Europe / Russia. So thank you to those who have answered that survey. Maybe you have. And 150 responses is good, and it's not that many, but it's good enough. So I'm not going to rely too much on the survey, but it will be interesting to show some statistics. Who loves statistics? I am a math teacher, so what I do, my master's is not in statistics. I used to hate statistics. Actually, the only class I ever failed at university was a statistics class. So I used to, when I was younger, hate it, but as a more mature person, hopefully, I actually appreciate statistics, but at a basic level. So just percentages, okay? Percentages is fine. So statistics, there'll be some pie charts on the screen. So hopefully, you guys can eat pie charts for dessert. Okay. So and finally, some thoughts from Paris. A little context: the Church of Paris is about 215 members. We're organized in house churches mostly, but also we have specialized ministries. We have teen ministry, campus ministry, and a ministry that the title is GoPro, which is Young Professionals Plus. If you want to know more, you can ask me. But it's a great ministry. And we have 5 couples serving as elders, so 5 elders and their wives, and 2 couples who are full-time staff. Both couples are working for the campus ministry. These pictures, I have a little laser here. This is really the next generation right here. But this is Tom and Courtney, and this is Bruno. And sorry if Margot ever sees this. You are also in my heart, but you were not on my picture. But Bruno's wife, Margot, is also serving with the church. And those both couples are under 35-year-olds. Actually, Bruno and Margot just got hired this year, and they're under 27 years old, I think. Yes, so it's encouraging. The Paris Church really puts faith in the next gen. And yeah, we have also a teachers group, and I will get back to that later. So, the survey, a little introduction about the survey. I had, like I said, 150 responses from different age groups, half under 35 and half above 35, pretty much. The next gen cutoff was decided at 35. Not by me, but for today, we'll say that because tonight we have a next gen mixer, and 35 was the cutoff, but I hope I don't offend any 36-year-olds in the room. But so that's just the survey, and mostly from, like I said, Europe / Russia, also 20% from North America, and different age spiritually. So that was interesting to see. All right, let's get into it. The role of a teacher. Here's my observation. The role of a teacher still isn't clear, and when I say the role of a teacher, it's also teaching the church in general, still isn't clear to all, especially to those not in leadership positions, which includes a lot of the younger generation. I am very grateful for this kind of these kind of weekends, moments, conferences, where we can really get together, talk about teaching. And last year I couldn't come, unfortunately, but I know there's a great teaching about what it is to be a teacher and everything. But we have to be mindful that outside these circles, maybe it's still very unclear, foggy, what it means to teach in the church. Not sure exactly. So this really came out as I was talking to different people. And even for me, I wasn't exactly sure when we talk about teachers or teaching in the church, I wasn't exactly clear. So I just want to remind this audience that there's still work to do in terms of communication with our brothers and sisters who are in our churches. It's normal for the fact that not all church members know everything that's going on behind the scenes, obviously, but clarification on something is good and helpful to have. So as we work on becoming teachers, we're interested in having more teachers, we also need to work on communicating it to our brothers and sisters who are in our circles. Here is a question that I started with, or that I'm going to start with on the survey. Sorry if it's too small, but I'll read it out loud. Basically, my question was, do you think that the idea of teaching and the role of a teacher is discussed enough in your church? Okay? And I'm going to present on the left, there will be the results from over 35-year-olds, and on the right from under 35-year-olds, which again is about half and half for the survey. So this was the result. As you can see, there's a big difference. It's normal that a lot of people say that we don't talk about this enough, because on any topic we always want to talk more, But there is a big difference with the under 35-year-olds. 72% said we don't talk about this enough. And 13% only said that we talk about this enough. Whereas on the over 35-year-olds, 35% said that we talk about this enough. That's one interesting difference. Another question that I asked is about preaching and teaching. And it's not necessarily at the center of an issue about teaching, but it is a good start sometimes to talk with people if they have an idea of difference between preaching and teaching. This was maybe one of the first things that I thought of when I started thinking about maybe teaching in the church, and when I was reading some scriptures, preaching and teaching, what's the difference? So sometimes it's a good start to kind of get a feel of how people think about that topic in the church. So I asked, is preaching and teaching usually done by the same person? And we have similar results, which is good. We go to the same churches, so we see the same things. But then I asked another question that I thought was, it was kind of an innocent question in a way, but I asked, should teaching and preaching be done by the same person? And I was a bit surprised by the results, because most people said no, which, I don't know, that's interesting, but I guess today we'll focus more on the fact that a lot of under 35 said no. 68% said no, it should not be done by the same person. So I think more than anything, it kind of shows maybe a misunderstanding or a lack of communication between what it means to preach, teach, So that's, I think, what I want to highlight today. I don't want to get too focused on these numbers, but I do feel like there is more communication, more discussion to have just in our churches about, preaching, teaching, teachers, who speaks on Sundays, what does he do, and that kind of thing. I quickly want to go through comments from the survey. So, okay, my survey was maybe not the best. Looking back, I could have done it better, of course, like everything. But at the end, I did ask if people had any comments about teaching in general in the church, and about half the people put comments in, which I thought was really great. So every comment that I'm going to highlight in this presentation is from different people. Here's an interesting comment. Teaching is very often discussed when we discuss women's role, but we rarely talk about what it is or the importance of it. That's how that person felt. Someone said, I haven't thought about it. Someone else said, I have to admit, I did not think so much about it. Someone said, having a teacher title may be viewed as contrary to the teaching of Matthew 23. Someone else said, the role of a teacher is not very supported biblically. So that's interesting that people felt that way. The idea of an official teacher's position may be weightier in an Asian culture where teachers may be afforded a lot of deference. So be mindful of cultural differences. But someone said we have 2 unpaid official teachers, so we're all for it. The teachers work very well with our staff, so completely different experience. I think that the teacher's role in our ICOC fellowship is not as clearly defined and understood. So someone basically said my point for this section. It will be good to have teaching about it. That's my favorite comment. What do you think about teaching? It would be good to have teaching about it. So we need teachers to teach us about teaching, so that's why we're here, I suppose. Okay, so here's my important idea. The more examples of teaching and of servant teachers in as many forms as needed, the better. This is what I want to share today on this in this section. Sometimes focusing on defining things can be a bit limiting. We need to have empowering definitions, if I can say that, and not limiting definitions. So even when we think about having teachers in our church, someone shared the quote, "Teachers teach." And that's really what we want. We want teaching, and whoever does the teaching, that's the teacher. We don't need necessarily capital T's right away. And in Paris, this is kind of the way it is. And it can change, maybe it will change, but right now it's really encouraging. There's a great culture in our church to just have people express their gifts. And we don't focus too much on titles or positions. We have 5 appointed elders, but we don't have appointed evangelists right now. Again, it can change, it's not necessarily the best way, but right now this is the case. We don't have appointed teachers, but we have a lot of people evangelizing, we have a lot of people teaching. So teachers teach, I think that's great, I need to repeat that. And the more examples of teaching in different ways, different contexts, Sundays, Wednesdays, every other day of the week, different kinds of teaching, in as many forms as possible, the better. And now I want to highlight what I added. As you can see, I added servant teacher, and this is really maybe my inspiration for this group here, this audience, and online as well, if you're following online. If I have to express one need for the next generation, is to have examples of servant teachers. This is what we need. And I'm very grateful in Paris, and I'm going to put pictures on the screen here. And these are pictures, very recent pictures. I took them yesterday. These are not my only examples, but these are great examples for me as servant teachers. Christian on the right, many of you know him. He travels a lot. He has traveled a lot. He's an example of a lifelong learner, always trying to learn. This summer, he took 3 weeks off his job. He works as a computer engineer. He took 3 weeks out of his job to go follow a course on biblical languages, which he has already done a lot of courses on that, but he continued to study that. Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, Koine Greek, and all that. And he, is a lifelong learner. Now, what I want to highlight the most is that Christian also co-leads this GoPro ministry. He's involved in D group, leads a D group, involved in brothers' lives, involved in Bible studies. He's been serving the church in many ways for many years. And that's what I want to highlight. And Brad and Anne, you know them, and Brad used the expression, this person doesn't need introduction. So this is the same for Brad and Anne. They don't need an introduction, but I want to highlight them as well because they've been serving the church for many, many years. And I get emotional when thinking about Brad and Anne. I grew up in the church, and my parents and Brad and Anne and other couples, they really helped me to grow. And this is what we need. Sorry. I prepared the class. I repeated twice, and both times I cried. But this is what we need. Servant leaders. Brad and Anne, they are now serving as elders, but they've been serving the church for many years. The Church of Paris basically lives thanks to this couple, thanks to Jesus Christ, God working through this couple. And this is what I want to imitate, and we can applaud them. They're both very intelligent, educated. Brad used to work as an engineer as well, very high level. Anne used to work, I think she is retired now, or just this month, or quit, even better. She just ended her career as a teacher, teaching English. She helps serve in the Kids Kingdom still. Brad helps serve, even filming the service. Simple things, and then more important things. They both have been involved in couples, counseling couples in the church, working for the unity in the church, being there through the hard times of the parish church, being here now for the good times of the parish church, and they really are role models for me. And you go to their house and you see the books that they've read, and you're like, oh, I wish I had the superpower to just read the book through the title. Every title is super inspiring, and you can point at the book, and Brad will say, "Oh yeah, this book by this guy is interesting because this is this." They don't just read; they retain information. And I don't know how they do it. And they teach, they serve, they do all these things, and this is what we need. Examples of servant teachers. Okay, and I'm speaking maybe now to the next generation. Sometimes for me, I can feel limited by, okay, what's the title I'm going for? What's the position? What's the responsibility exactly? But we have examples of our church, and there's many here, and I don't know all of you, but I know it's the same for you guys. We have many examples of our older generation who have just been serving God and serving His church, and that's just what we want. And then some gifts will appear about teaching, and we'll teach, but we don't have to be too focused on teacher with a capital T. Just use your gifts. And for the next generation, the need is to have examples. So that's what we want. We don't want teachers who are just someone who says, oh, I don't want to really serve in the ministry, and I like to read books, so I guess I'll be a teacher. That's not what we want. We want disciples of Christ who are deep in their Bible study, deep in their spirituality, intimacy with God, and also serving the church. I think the expression that was used last year was church-building teachers, which I like that expression as well. I used a different one, servant teacher, but you get the idea. This is the verse that we want to keep in mind. Keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching, right? Persist in this, for by so doing you will save both yourselves and your hearers. And I believe, it's my faith that these three people have done this, are doing this, watching closely on themselves and on the teaching, and they have saved many. So thank you to you. And this is the scripture we want to keep in our hearts. Conclusion on this section: how can it be clearer for everyone? These are questions that we can ask ourselves. Should it be defined in the same way from one church to another? We can talk about these things, about the definition of role of a teacher. But most importantly, the next generation, because that's what we're talking about today, needs a lot of examples of servant teachers in as many forms as possible. More than official roles, we need role models. More than official roles, we need role models. Amen? Okay, let's move on to the structure of the church. Here's my observation. Defining the role of a teacher also comes with defining the place of teachers within the structure of the church. So we do have to talk about structure. I think it was Malcolm who used an expression, invisible hierarchy. I don't know if he prepared that expression, but maybe he just used it. Invisible hierarchy, I thought that was interesting. Invisible structure, I don't know. There is structure. You have to decide at some point where you're going to meet, at what time, etc. So there's obviously organization, structure, roles, and everything. So we have to think about that. And I guess for the next generation, what we also need is maybe examples of paid position in the church, because you can go to a campus, someone in the campus ministry, and ask if they want to become evangelists in the church, and they kind of have an idea what that means and how that role fits in the church. And they can say no or yes. But if you go and you say, do you want to be a teacher? And I think I overheard this very question yesterday outside of this class, someone talking to a younger guy, so do you want to become a teacher? And I think I was just passing by, but basically what I heard was, yeah, but I don't know what that looks like. So that's the need that we need to have. And we don't need to have all the teachers paid on staff, obviously, but we need, different ways to serve. The next generation, the people in their 20s, I don't know if you remember when you were in your 20s, it might have been a long time ago. But no, I'm just kidding. Just want to make sure you're following. But people in their 20s, they're starting their career. They're starting their career, so you have to be mindful of that, when you're talking to them about teaching or positions in the church. A woman who just had her business degree, is probably wiser for her to find a job in the business position, whereas a minister who's been ministering the church for 30 years, it makes sense for him to, study theology as an extra, but it's a bit harder for someone who just graduated, who just studied hard, and is now looking for a job, and then do you want to do this role? So just be mindful of that. There's career choices are important. And I talk about this as well because of here we've heard a lot about learning through universities, having degrees. But if you talk to an 18-year-old who just came out of high school, the way they choose a degree, it's partly what they want to do, but hopefully it's also they want to find a job, eventually. So if you say, hey, go study theology, and then they do 5 years of theology and there's no jobs, it might be a bit tougher. So just, that's also a need that people think about, or the next gen thinks about when you think about teachers. Here are some questions that I asked on the survey. 90% of people were part of churches that hired people full-time, so we know what it looks like to have people hired full-time. The majority of people said that a church should consider hiring someone in a teaching position. This question was a bit maybe limited by the answers possible, but I guess that's the way it was. But yes is orange, and maybe if they can and already have someone working full-time, that's red. So only 9% said no. So, the majority of people are quite ready to have on-staff teachers. And it doesn't really change much for over and under 35-year-olds. I mean, there's quite of a change between the orange. The orange is no in this graph. More people said no under 35, which is interesting. But basically, it's similar. And, we know this, but there's not, right now, a lot of paid positions in the church. So that's an observation. But the encouraging part is that there are a lot of teachers serving, even not paid. So we need that probably more than anything else. And again, that was my first point. But there are a lot of people are realizing that there are people serving in their church as teachers, even if teaching and the role of teacher is not maybe discussed enough, apparently, or well defined. People do recognize that there are teachers in their church, so that's encouraging. I do think there's still a need for a better idea of how it fits in the organization of the church, and I think that's why we're doing these kind of conferences as well, is to talk about this. Some comments, I don't want to take too much time, but this is interesting. Just so you know kind of how people feel. This person said, teaching ministry sounds really good. I don't know what's going on between the man I consider the teacher of our ministry and the leaders. That was an interesting comment, but highlighting the fact that there's a big need of communicating, working, teachers with leaders. Not sure if the teaching group is official or was official and now isn't. All these things. Different opinions. And the last comment here, maybe I can highlight it right now. Or the last two comments. First, the second to last. I think the absence of teaching ministry or official teaching positions is days to a general lack of structural support for the different gifts we have in the body. So this was a bit of a negative comment, but I do like the way they put it. Structural support for different gifts. And it goes back to my point on definitions. It's same for structure. And that's why I liked the expression of invisible structure. But structure needs to be empowering. Structure needs to be a good way to help gifts be developed and used. But for young people who grew up in the church, like me, sometimes the way things are done, the structure, feels limiting. This is the way things are done. That means this is the way it will be done forever. Which hopefully is not the case, right? We can change a little bit. But if we have certain roles or positions, we maybe feel like these are the only positions we'll ever have, and so all that kind of stuff. There's someone said actually. Sorry, I'm going to read another comment. But my own opinion, third from the bottom. My own opinion: teachers are not to be placed on time full time as only teachers. If they cannot continue in more than one role, they should only be consulted and compensated for their time, which is an opinion that can be defended. If you think that, if you're looking for ideas on how to employ teachers, you can ask Carlos. Carlos has many ideas. If you've talked to Carlos one time, you know he has a lot of ideas. And if you're looking for ideas of how to have full-time jobs as teachers, he has a lot of needs and things that we can do for teachers. But no, I just mean like there's different ways to serve as teachers, but it's just a need to talk about it a bit more within our churches. Okay, so here's what I want to highlight for the parish church and an important idea. Local churches should try to develop the teaching gift as much as possible in different ways, according to the needs, the strengths, the structure in place, etc. I think it was said a couple times this weekend, so I appreciate it, but I'm just going to say it again. It's not always going to look like the same way in different churches. There are different needs, different strengths, different cultures, and all that, but we need teaching. So we need to just start teaching and trying, teaching. How does it fit in just doing it and not be too caught up in certain structure. In the parish church, we have a group of teachers, and we could call it a ministry as well, but it's called a group. I looked at the WhatsApp group yesterday, and it said it was created on September 2019, so if you want a date of creation, about 3 years ago. And it's nice to have a group of teachers and not necessarily official roles or too focused on structure, because it's quite open. We have men, women, young, old, people with certain degrees or not. And so that's kind of the advantage of not having put maybe a position or something too limiting, because we're not ruffling any feathers. We're just a group of teachers. And no one is on staff as teacher in Paris, but again, no one is on staff as elder or on staff as evangelist either. But we have a lot of people doing that responsibility. And one thing that I wanted to highlight about this group of teachers and their relationship with the leadership, obviously we have an elder and his wife in the group, so it helps a lot because they're also part of shepherding group for our church. So there's a good relationship with our leadership, and one of the roles of the teaching group is to help decide who will speak on Sundays and what the topic of the church will be for the next few months. So that's a good way to have direct impact on the leadership of and the shepherding of the people. I want to put their picture again. And I am doing this to be biblically correct, because these are elders that serve as elders and teachers. So if you remember 1 Timothy 5:17, they are worthy of double honor. So 2 pictures on the slide. Yeah, we can follow it again. And now they're embarrassed and uncomfortable. But the thing is, I do also want to highlight the fact that there's really a trust in the parish church with the younger generation. The group is the group is open to younger guys like me or Dorian, and I have a picture of Dorian later, you'll see. But our input is as valued as any of the group, and we are encouraged to speak on Sundays as well. It's very it's full of trust and grace, and even though we might feel like we don't do as good a job as people who are more experienced, it's okay. We're here to learn and to grow together. The scripture that I wanted to highlight is this in 1 Timothy. Flee the evil desires of youth, so that's good for the next generation, and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace. Hopefully that's true for the older generation as well, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. And so that's really, I think, one of the things to keep in mind. We want to have the next generation involved, but it's, together, along with those who call on the Lord. And so these people call on the Lord with a pure heart, hopefully. This is another thing that I wanted to highlight, the fact that we are 6 of us here from Paris, and 6 of us, 2 women, 4 men, 3 over 35, 3 under 35. So those are good numbers. I like that. And yeah, and these pictures are even more recent. I took them today. So concluding questions, maybe how do teachers work in a team? These are kind of conversation that we could have. How are teaching ministry established and what is their purpose, like practically within the church? Is my church an ideal place for the brothers and sisters to use and develop their gifts? And I will just take a quick break on the word sisters here, because I do want to, show the fact that I'm inspired. What is the word? Admonish? No, is that the word? Sorry. I lift up. That's good. I'll use that. Lift up the sisters in this room, because I talked about the lack of structural support, a need for maybe structural support to have roles as teachers. I mean, it's hard for me to. If you're a sister in this room, you're full of hope and faith, like was talked about today, because right now it's very hard to see how I can have a role in front of the congregation for our sisters. And I just want to say that you're full of faith and hope, and I just want to lift you up, because it's really inspiring, your examples for me, because you really want to serve God as teachers. And right now there's not a lot of positions of teachers who are women. So you are trailblazers, and it's amazing. So really, that's really good. Thank you so much for having that heart and hope and faith. So keep at it. Okay, I will go quickly through that one, because I do want to respect my time. The next generation needs help to get a vision of how to serve as teachers. So we need help training. These are some statistics. A lot of people who answered the survey have had people go through school of missions programs, which is encouraging. And these are great programs and are growing. Not a lot of people have seen students in their campus ministry study theology or ministry, which is understandable, but maybe a bit sad. Doesn't change much for. I tried to see if it changed a lot between North America and outside of North America, but it's pretty much the same. Most people said that it's not a negative thing to be under 30 years old and a Bible teacher, so just, you're fine. Well, 9% said that it was, but most of the people said it was not a problem or actually a positive. Okay, some comments that are maybe a general sense. The general sense I get is that the younger generation has less in value of the role of teachers. Okay, someone said, I think it's dangerous if training takes only place within the ICOC. That's an interesting thought to have. How much training should we have outside of the ICOC? Men and women need the educational and communication training. This middle comment was pretty long, but I did want to highlight parts of it. This person was talking about a brother that they saw had a gift of teaching, and they said there's not really a role model or someone to walk with him down this path. And I did want to talk about this. I think role models, but someone to walk along. Mentorship. That's, I think, a big need that we have right now. Mentorship. We need someone we can walk with in the teaching position. And he has received conflicting messages about joining the School of Missions, because it is seen as the ISAM 1, European School of Missions, because it is seen as geared towards people who want to take on more church leadership / evangelist role. And also, I did highlight that part. There's also a lack of direction for the women who feel drawn to, are interested in, or have particular skills in this area. Again. But yeah, I think we do have to think about, our School of Missions. How do we want to use that to help teachers grow? I do think it's important that the School of Missions is for missions, people who are more interested in being on the mission field, but there is a place for that to maybe, I know for example, I was in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, Africa, this summer, and they have a School of Missions in Abidjan, and there was a teacher there who said that, he helps teach for the School of Missions, and he recognized, among the students, there was a couple who kind of seemed to have the gift of teaching, and so he took them under his wing to help them walk along this path as well. So I thought that was really encouraging to hear. That's a good example. There's teaching that we do, maybe if someone teaches at a School of Missions, but then there's personal walk that can help a lot. And I think, like Rolan said, Doug Jacoby talked about this before, but we have these already, but these mentorship relationships are very important. Okay, I'm going to finish here, important idea, future leaders in both training and mentoring. In Paris, we are using former Islam students. Concluding questions. What stops churches from embracing the importance of teaching and raising teachers? How do we set up mentoring partners? These are questions that can fuel discussion. Okay, although there are still many questions to answer and conversations to have, the most important thing is to act, to develop teaching ministries, to teach, teachers teach, to communicate as much as possible in our churches, to have more teachers in different forms, and to help the next generation understand and have a vision for teaching through training and mentoring. Thank you very much. Rolan will speak now.
Oh, thank you. It's a huge height difference. Go. Great. Thank you, Louis. Great job. It was a joy working on this presentation with you. The voice of the next gen is so important. And thank you for sharing that. The survey was a brilliant idea. I love your points, and we really feel your heart and your passion for the teaching ministry. I believe that there are going to be some good talks today because of what you've shared. And may God continue to bless the work in Paris. Brad and Anne, thank you for holding the fort there and for all the work that you do. Thank you for everything that you do. I had to say that twice, double honor. So, yeah. And a shout out to all the next gen guys who are here and listening online. Thank you for joining us. As we continue, let's talk a little bit more about the gap between the generations as it manifests in the typical workplace. This is from Incremental Consulting. Check out this table, which sums up some of the key differences between the generations in the workforce. What stands out to you? It's interesting, huh? We haven't even gotten to Gen Z yet. For me, I like this line, print me a copy to send me a copy to, I'll Google it myself. Now, I don't want to overstate the generational gaps, and in some contexts, the gaps may not even be felt. But we should at least be sensitive that certain differences do exist. With these gaps in mind, let's dive into some principles without stressing too much over the gaps. How can we think and do better in raising up teachers, specifically the next generation of teachers? The first principle is what I call the live demo principle, and the pertinent passage would be Philippians 4:9. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Louis alluded to this earlier. When you think about first century, Paul worked closely with a younger, less experienced Timothy. Timothy has said here, learned, received, heard, saw. And Timothy would continue ministering in Paul's footsteps long after the apostles' death. Same thing with other men following Paul. Even before Paul, you see Jesus being intentional, demonstrative as a teacher. Jesus shows us that teaching is a purposive activity. Imagine 3 years, just 3 years of ministry, high degree of intentionality, on-the-job training. And I think it's fair to say that Jesus' followers were of all ages. I think about how some of them, like James and John, still dependent on their father's business, were much younger than others. At any rate, younger folks like to see things demonstrated. People of any age tend to seek role models, and that drive seems to be more pronounced with millennials and Gen Z. They're not into seeking advice as much as emulating something that works. We won't win them by telling them what to do, but they respond to demonstrative faith, seeing people teach, seeing people preach, and living those teachings out. The youth today are very big on genuineness, walking the talk. They want to see you do it. And so they want someone who not necessarily has done it all, but who's ahead, in that they should have created space for those who follow. That's something Doug Jacoby has done as he jump-started our Philippine teaching ministry with AIM 20 years ago and stayed in touch with us, coaching us, helping us, praying for us. And I would say the same for AIM UK with Malcolm and Andy, offering top-notch instruction, but also creating space for future teachers. Still on modeling, and the first issue that Louis mentioned, the role of a teacher, here's an interesting quote from a book. Sometimes there is teaching in preaching. Both seek for a change in the listener, but teaching explains while preaching announces the message. I think there's some food for thought here. Teaching explains. And I think we need to do a better job in many places at explaining things. Part of explaining is giving the why. Millennials are big on purpose, and purpose is another way of saying why. Perhaps more than any other generation in history, millennials, and to a large degree, older Gen Z kids, are very in touch with their own value sets and the why they do the things they do. Aside from live demo, the other principle that I'd like to present is the bamboo principle. Being Asian, I got to use an Asian analogy. As teachers, we got to be both rooted and flexible, like the bamboo, which, though not imposing in size, weathers even the worst hurricanes. We've got to be both solidly planted, but also sway with the wind. So we've got to know our stuff, that's a given, but we've also got to be sensitive as to how people learn, how people mature, how they take on information, how they absorb instruction. And we need to be aware of the different modalities of how people learn and how people should teach. To be effective teachers and future teachers, we'll have to reasonably adapt to culture, including youth culture, pop culture, the culture of the times, which can, of course, shift quickly, more quickly than we might be comfortable with. Regarding adapting, in the book Generation Gap, social analyst Kevin Munger tackles the idiosyncrasies of the different generations and the forces which conditions them. He mentions cohort consciousness among people of similar age, the tendency to think and decide alike. For instance, boomers continue to prefer the media culture of their youth, but next gens, they don't want that. They use the internet and shun old ways. So just in this area of media consumption, divergent media habits have led more people to identify with their own generation. So they gravitate towards certain beliefs and hold on to them. This keeps the generation gap as a gap and makes the gaps even wider. And this affects things like, in society, political dynamics, including voting preferences. Now, could it be that cohort consciousness happens in the church too? Maybe some of us tend to gravitate to traditional beliefs, stuck in our old ways. And in the teaching ministry, even maybe slowly, imperceptibly, teachers or older teachers develop some sort of cohort consciousness. For me, as a Gen Xer, mentored by Gordon Ferguson, a boomer, I really appreciated how Gordon gave me some freedom, allowed me to come into my own in ways different than how he grew as a teacher. Still on adaptability, consider Paul as a teacher, how he composed his letters differently. Let's look at 1 Thessalonians and Colossians, for instance. Many scholars believe that 1 Thessalonians is one of the earliest New Testament writings, or one of the earlier ones. If we compare 1 Thessalonians with Paul's later letters, we find Paul adjusting based on occasion and even varied his approach, his technique. Both 1 Thessalonians and Colossians have a rich Christology, but Colossians differs in vocabulary, difference in syntax. So what do we see here? Paul, the teacher, was able to teach about Jesus in different ways, in different levels, and different styles. We could also compare Romans with Galatians. Romans generally covers the same themes as Galatians, written earlier, but Paul, aside from being less personal in Romans, he doesn't say, "You foolish Romans," he doesn't say that. He's more technical. But also, in this book, The Teaching Ministry of Congregations, one scholar says this about Romans. Romans is best characterized by adopting the strategies and tone of epidictic rhetoric, which focuses primarily on the celebration of values held in common. It's interesting. The Greek text displays very clever rhetoric. So Paul presents the gospel differently here. Paul presents the gospel as something we share, something we can celebrate together. And this was a good move in Paul's part because he didn't found the church in Rome. But see, Paul shows a great deal of flexibility. This is what I call literary limbo rock. Just to get his message through. That was Paul was doing. He's flexible. He employs something that he's familiar with, the Jewish diatribe in Romans 1-4, but also, one could say, he's approaching this creatively with Greek rhetoric. He's restyling himself. So much for principles, but before I go on to my second point, opportunities, I'd like to share a little bit something about our two vehicles for teaching and training in the Philippines. Our Bible school is called APLA, Asia Pacific Leadership Academy, started in 2008. And that focuses on academic teaching. Our missions training school is APSUM, just a few years old, and that's focused on training staff and missionaries. It's been a great partnership over the years. The two entities complement each other, with the School of Missions outsourcing classes from APLA. I head up the APLA. A sister is a program director for APSUM, and I serve as academic director for APSUM. But anyway, it's a good partnership. They complement each other, and praise God, we've had disciples of different generations join our different classes, both, especially in the APLA, different ages, from ages 14 to 78, attending our classes. On to number 2. This brings us to point 2, opportunities. 3 things I'd like to say on this. We want to develop culture and credentials. Both culture and credentials have to be elevated. These two come together. When we started our efforts for teaching back in 2010, the teaching ministry was a whopping 10 people. 10 people for 30 churches, 4,000 plus disciples. It was tough. But we cast a vision to develop a culture of learning, something that Mati mentioned earlier today, and something that Louis also mentioned. The call was for each one of our churches to start teaching committees, and for the Manila church, the bigger church, for each sector to have a teaching committee. Now, majority of our churches have teaching committees, and we call them TCOMs. TCOMs. Each teaching committee does projects based on need. I gather the TCOMs twice a year for reporting and encouragement. And now our next step is to make these committees intergenerational. Earlier this year, I asked the committees to lower the average, like really compute the average age of their TCOMs. And I asked them to lower the average age of their TCOM by engaging millennials. And it's been exciting. It's within this culture that some have decided to go for further studies, and credentials definitely mean more within a culture of learning. Moving on, we want to build expertise and empathy. People and organizations tend to focus on one or the other, but especially in helping professions, both are important. Think about doctors, for instance. We are drawn to doctors who are both competent and compassionate. Teachers need to be the same. Now, the next gen, they have questions. I'm learning so much from talking to the next gen and even my daughters. I'm learning not to shy away from their questions. They want their questions answered even if they don't say them out loud. But also, they want to feel that people care. They want to know that people understand their situation and their needs. Lastly, for opportunities, we need to foster mentoring and niching. Louis talked about this already. I won't harp on it too much, but both of these are crucial. They go together. Older teachers have to take it upon themselves. The vision is to have subject matter experts in the future in more than just one generation. Coming in for a landing now with a few more practical points for creating opportunities. In the book, Bridging the Generation Gap, the author suggests, evaluate the ages of your workforce. Develop strategies for attracting and retaining. Identify ways to be more efficient. Well, I believe this can apply to our teaching ministries. If you have a teaching ministry now, evaluate the ages, then develop strategies, and then work on greater efficiency. Well, in our case, that's going to be engagement and effectivity. Finally, here's something we're excited about in the Philippines. We are faithfully plotting the future. At present, we have two teachers in the Philippines. That's myself, Gen X on staff, and Romel, Gen X not on staff. But we've already identified some gifted individuals who can be teachers in the next 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. I'm getting goosebumps. But it's exciting just to think about it. We have a good mix. We've got both paid staff and non-paid people, and people from 3 generations. And by the way, all these icons you see on screen have names behind them. We've sowed the seeds already. They know there's a pathway for them. And when I talk about teaching, training, and learning more about Scripture, and you, brother, sister, you being a great part of the future, you see a sparkle in their eyes. Some of them have started graduate studies already. And there you have it. We looked at needs and concerns, principles, and opportunities. We do hope this has been helpful. Let's forge ahead, brothers and sisters. This is only the beginning, and God has great things in store for our teaching ministries. He will pave the way toward thriving, multi-generational teaching ministries. And may He bless our hearts to make that happen. Amen. Thank you very much. So, we will have a break at this time. We will resume with the panel at 3:30. Panelists, please be ready. Thank you so much.
Douglas?
I know it gets harder and harder. I did a great job. Personal, clear, time. I look forward to dinner tonight. Should we walk together to it? Between 6:15 and 6:15, anywhere in there. It's very narrow. There's no room for error. So better synchronize our watch. Like you. Okay.
Again, everyone, please come on in. Okay. Otto, can you bring everybody in? Okay, thanks.
He's not going to have an introduction, so you just have to invite everybody to the panel.
He's not following the instructions?
He already did his...
Yeah, he did his thing. Okay, we'll jump right in. Oh, you know what? We're going to get out early again. We might get out early again. Oh, wow. You're making up for me.
One guy.
Okay. Okay, we'll let that happen. Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask the panel, may the panel participants please take their places. Can't take him anywhere. Okay, welcome everyone. This will be our last session for the day. And it really is a continuation on of what Rowan and Luis were already talking about. It's the teaching in the next generation theme. And as you can see, we have a multi-generation group here. I won't say who the baby boomer is. You can make those assessments yourself. But we've had our presentation already, so now we're just going to enter into a time of question and answer. And if you want to direct your question to a particular person, then please just name that person as you're making your comment. And also we'll be taking comments from our online participants as well. So is there someone here that'd like to begin with a question towards our panelists?
Make it a softball. Go ahead.
All right.
Okay, do you have microphones? Yep.
Oh, so should I take this? Oh.
Go ahead, Ali.
Okay, yeah, okay. Let's start from the top. So I'm from the church in Edinburgh, Scotland. We are 30 disciples. So I want to question this to regards our small congregation. Like a lot of churches, our generations are mostly over 40. A wise man once said to me, your church should reflect the city that you live in. We have 4 universities in the city, so it's a place of learning. We have 5 of our teen girls have been baptized, so we're doing something right with the families. Our campus situation is constantly in flux. We have a lot of people come for a 1-year master's program. We have a sister from London who's just starting a 4-year program part-time. That's unusual. Debbie's here from Berlin, but she's studying a master's. That's very normal. So we're transitioning. We have a lot of people who became disciples and have moved to other countries, which is great. And I suppose what I'm just trying to say is I think it's hugely exciting. There's a young couple in Edinburgh, 20 and 23, and I have great vision for them. There's a scripture, I think it's Job 38, where I'm always quoting at them that it says something like, that I'm young in years, but I have the Holy Spirit of God within me, because I know it can be difficult I don't want to label people next gen, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know what generation I am. I just know I'm closer to heaven than I was when I started. But I think this is, and our previous, that Marcus and Amy Overstreet kept getting into our heads, we need to be a multi-generational church. Brother mentioned earlier about, particularly with the brothers, the biggest thing that we have to overcome is pride. And I think as we get older, that pride can increase. So I think it's really important that we have a vision for our young people. I have 2 sons who are 12 and 9, and I want them to have role models. And there's very few in that bracket that are closer to my son's age than my age. So I thank you for being part of this. I believe that for God's churches to continue going, we need to have a vision for our young people. I thank you for all that serve in this. I totally take on board what everybody said. We need mentors, but we need to exemplify that to people. So I sound like I'm commenting rather than questioning, but any help with our situation as regards that, we try and encourage as many people as we can of a generation and their children's generation to study in Edinburgh. It's a great way of studying. We have Douglas Jacoby up the road, which he's great with evidences and stuff. So there is potential, but we're a small, and this is our situation. So if you could, any of you who would like to take on advice that we could have for our small church, to have the vision for those next generation. Thank you.
A couple thoughts. I went to a lecture at Pepperdine University on reaching the next generation, similar to this one. And a presenter, a PhD from Fuller, had done a bunch of research. And one of the things that stood out was the Gen Z and millennials, you got to put them to work. If they don't have a role, if they don't get to lead quickly, if they don't get to express their gift or talents, we're going to lose them. And so I think we've taken the track in our church where we've had teenagers that have become Christians and campus probably for the last 3 months do the communion and it be a testimony. And don't fall out of your chairs. It's both men and women. All right? We'll let a sister get up there or a man. They don't preach. That's my job. Yeah. But that was supposed to be funny too. I don't get I don't get Europe. I got to work on this. And I'll make a shameless plug. We need more of these conferences. This has changed my life. It's been fantastic. I'm so grateful for the Tallinn Church. But the Teachers Conference, the ICOC Teachers Conference next year is going to be at Oklahoma Christian University on reaching the next generation. That's the whole conference. And we chose Oklahoma Christian. We're still trying to build the relationships and keep the connection with the Stone Campbell movement. And Oklahoma Christian has a lot of professors that are experts in the field of youth ministry, youth and family ministry, and next generation. And one fella has done a study on grandparents' influence on their grandkids becoming Christians, so that I'm very interested in. So,
awesome. Yes, I just wanted to add. I thought about something. We had a house church once with about maybe 15 people, 20 people, and there's a family there with young daughters who were 4 and 6, and what came time for the communion, and so the person who was speaking, sharing scriptures and everything, he said, does anyone want to pray? And the 6-year-old girl said, I want to pray. And so obviously we let her pray, and it was great prayer, and inspiring to see a 6-year-old girl praying for Jesus. And so I think when you're a smaller group, you have a great opportunity to be a family setting, and it's probably not the time to think about dividing into teens ministry, campus ministry, because if there's one person in the ministry, I mean, it's not. So, yeah, and having a family feel, it's a great experience, and I don't think we need to feel ashamed or hopeless. It's a great time to be together. 35, it's great. We get to all be in the same apartment. I mean, And having people involved, and I think I just wanted to second what Gregg said, because the worst thing to do in the situation I was describing is to say no to the 6-year-old girl to pray. And we all agree with that. And it's the same thing. I mean, if there's a teenager who's a Christian, they have Jesus in their lives. They have the Spirit of God. They're baptized, so they can share for communion. I mean, and it's just having us work together. And even if it's sometimes, a bit weird what they said because they need to grow in some areas, that's fine too, because we're only 30, so we can be easily graceful with each other. So it's a great opportunity, I think, to have a family feel, and I think this family feel is what's most important for that size. But that was my thought.
I'm going to throw in a comment. Tammy and I had the honor of going to the UK in 2007, and when we came to the Birmingham church, there was 57 members, nobody under the age of 27. The 27-year-old had come to us from Finland, so he was the youngest guy in the church. And when we left 9 years later, there were 25 disciples under the age of 25. But what we did is we imported what was lacking. And a door opened completely unexpectedly that at Hope Youth Corps could come to Birmingham. And boy, we jumped at that like a fish going for the hook, and then did for the next 8 years, we did some form of youth corps, I think 6 times officially. And that it finally, after 3 years, the group of teens that we had said, that's what young people ministry looks like. It took years. But once they got sort of the flavor, we'd crossed a hump. And then it was easier to get the next group of preteen, things started to actually happen naturally. But we had to bring in the model as much as we'd like to. I can't model being an 18-year-old very well. No, it doesn't work. And, so it's important that we actually supply that what's missing. And so that made a gigantic difference. God really blessed it. And God sent us that first youth corps out of the blue. It was supposed to go to Mexico, but there'd been all these kidnappings, so they wanted to send the kids somewhere else, and we got the call. And we're like, we promise you no one will get kidnapped. So, but that's what the church needs to see it. And I think the teaching ministry is not any different than that in a way. You got to bring it in. You got to show it and demonstrate it, and that gets people interested and curious and excited about it.
I would like to add something. I think my experience in Madrid, because Madrid is a very small church, we were like 40 members, and when I got baptized, the youngest person was 27 years old, and I was 15. And when I saw the child of a sister that was 15, and then I was 27, I was like, oh, wow, that's a huge difference in age. But I think that the people in the leadership back then were really good at paying attention, identifying, and they gave me a welcome and said, and I said, hey, but how do I do a welcome? I don't know how to do a welcome. And so they basically gave me clear assignments, realistic assignments for the level of maturity and time and training that I had. And little by little, started with communion. I started preaching very early on in the church, in the main rotation. Like I was 17 when I started, 18. And I always had to send my script to the main leader. He will give me feedback, and then after preaching, he will give me more feedback. And I think that you need to be able to see potential, and whether it's in written form or speaking form or organizing or whatever, and say, hey, and encourage those people, do you see yourself doing this? And if they say yes, creating mini assignments and then scaling it as they progress, because they need to also be reliable. It's not just about ability, because they need to be faithful and exemplary, because many young people, when I say young people, I mean like 18, 17, I'm 28, so I'm still quite young. I don't feel young though, I have aches now everywhere, but anyway, that's a different story. But sometimes they say, hey, Carlos, I want to preach. They say to me, and I say, because I'm the youngest in the leadership team, so they usually come to me and say, Okay, you can preach to your friends, and or I say, okay, so prepare this devotional for the D group. See how you do it, and start reading this book about how to preach, how to do a topical sermon, how to do an expository sermon, and see if they do the homework, because if they don't put in the work, then it won't be effective. And I think for me it was really helpful, like when people acknowledge my inclination or my desire to do more in this aspect, they gave me mini assignments and they started scaling it as I was progressing. And I think that, but you need to, I do believe that other people need to be the ones saying, like, would you be interested in doing something like this? Because if you start seeing talent or some inclination towards this, talk, hey, have you thought about writing a blog on your quiet times, or what you're learning, and self-document your growth as a Christian? Have you thought of leading these groups? Have you thought of, taking care of this person or that person? And I think that you create microcosmos, and then they get to the level that they start preaching to the whole congregation, and then dreaming to become, an evangelist or teacher in this case. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Next question. I want to say thank you to the panelists, every one of you. Your presentations and your classes have been edifying. I've got takeaways from all of them, and I'm so grateful that you all put in the work and came here and supported the conference. Thank you so much. I heard from Louis that in his class that there needs to be more, or it would be it's a concern, a positive thing, that we should be communicating more somehow about what is a teacher, what is the role of a teacher, what's the value of teaching ministry. And there is such a thing as the teacher service team, right? Gregg, sitting on the panel, is there, myself, Andy, Valder, a number of us, Douglas, in this room are on that service team. Is there something we can do at the teacher service team to communicate better? If not, how should that communication, where should it be coming from? That's one question. And the second question is, back to the teacher service team, what's your impression, and what would you expect us to be doing and this is for the younger generation question.
Thank you for your question. Okay, the only thought I have right now, maybe I can think about it more, but I thought about when I was talking to Rolan about our class, that's one of the first thing he said is like, but do you know about the teacher service team? Because I think he's also part of it. And so I think what I realized when I was looking at the parish church is, there's a big need for translation because most people don't necessarily speak English. But I thought about this more in terms of what we need to do. We need to help translate what's published. So I'm not answering the question, but I'm saying we need to translate the work so that people can read it. That's the first step. But I don't know if my fellow panelists have ideas, please.
Go right ahead.
So I really appreciate that question. I think it's a great question, and it's actually something that I know I've thought about myself because I am aware of the teachers service team. I've actually served on one of our service teams before, the International Singles Service Team. And I think a huge disconnect that I see is I just don't know what you do. It's not that I know what you do, but I don't. Does that make sense? And so I think if there's a way to, one, communicate it in a succinct fashion, but also to be where young people are, would be great. And so I know that I would consider myself to be young, sort of. And I would also consider myself a digital native. So most of my time I spend online. And I don't know, for our ICOC specific online media, I don't know that the content is being created by digital natives, if that makes sense. And so for me, it would be really helpful to sort of come to my level or come to my house. I don't know what others think, but so there's a bit of a relatability that that I think might help. And so perhaps some younger people on the team, maybe.
I also think that their Disciples Today was collaborating with specifically a brother called Patrick Genova. They are leading the church in Connecticut, and he was one of the main people behind the All Nations app that they launched before the summit in Orlando this year. And I mean, Patrick happens to be my best friend, and he was with Cash and Maria when the mission in Madrid, and Patrick and Lamisha are just phenomenal. And I spent probably 5 days after the conference in their house, and he was telling me all about this digital ministry, dreams, and things like that. So I do believe that, because I know Patrick's dream, and he's a dreamer, and he puts in the work. And the idea that I also joined the dream was, okay, we need to find a way of centralizing all of the great resources out there that are scattered everywhere and give visibility to what already exists. And I do believe that the teacher service team, right? The teacher service team could utilize this platform, All Nations app, and what Patrick Genova and Disciples is trying to do to be more communicative, to boom weekly saying something. This is our mission. This is what we're trying to do. And I think that then local churches could spread the word, saying, "Hey guys, there is this app." And it would be great for those that speak English, try to give weekly or monthly news on what's going on in the global movement and translating this news in a summary and then give this in a welcome monthly in local churches. I think that could be an effective way of working. And if you want the number of Patrick Genova, so he will happily talk to you and all of that. So we've been talking a lot and emailing many teachers to be able how to centralize more the content. So yeah.
Just a brief question in response to your question. Is there a YouTube channel for the teacher service team or anything like that?
There is a website.
There's a website. Yeah. Yes. And now, obviously, there are many different teachers, right? And all of them kind of have their own platforms for how they teach and disseminate ideas, and that's all great. But it may be useful to have a YouTube channel where you can put, say, highlights from different lessons or conferences, etc., which then link to their individual platforms that can give some individual publicity to these different teachers, as well as allow people to have, I mean, for me, that would be helpful, to have a YouTube channel that I could go to. And it would, it keeps you current. It's not necessarily, let's be honest, we can't listen to everybody's hour-and-a-half lesson all the time, but a highlights channel could kind of capture enough that you can then direct people to further content when they're interested in it. That'd just be my only thought on communication.
Would you like to run our YouTube channel?
No, I wouldn't. But I'd love to watch it. Thank you.
We need to find an intern.
Okay. I just want to read the question that came in online, just because you can answer it in a few seconds. It's all based on what was just said. You did not mention much about social media and electronic media in general in your presentations. Do you see these being a big influence in the future teaching, or do you see their influence diminishing? And the group said?
Yes, big influence.
Big influence, okay. We've all heard that now. Okay, very good.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm very excited that you are here. I have a question for our next gen panelists. When I was baptized, I found out that ICOC started in 1979 in the Kempel's living room. Later, I realized that that's not the whole picture. So we are part of Stone Campbell movement. So do you sense any kind of connection to the Stone Campbell movement? Do you think it's important or not?
Wait, so you're saying that it didn't all start in the Gempel's living room?
Well, it's not completely true, yes.
Haven't you heard the glory? No. But, I would say that I agree with, I think, the spirit of the question, which is there is a need to be aware of our roots, where we come from. And, it's a question that I've thought about many times, and I think probably many of us have considered. Do we consider ourselves to be truly a part of the restoration movement in all that entails and all that means? That's a big question, not one that I intend to answer. I don't think I'm qualified to answer it, but I will say that I believe we ought to be. We ought to be about restoring New Testament Christianity and all that means. And there's a lot of history behind different attempts to do that. But I do think that a greater awareness of the Stone Campbell movement or the Restoration movement, however we want to phrase that, is crucial. And I would say I'm definitely a fan of us pursuing all that means to truly restore New Testament Christianity. Now, I guess built into my response is the idea that, well, have we arrived? I think we're all here because we know we haven't arrived, and there's room for growth, and there's always going to be room for growth. But I think a greater awareness of where we come from in both successful and failed attempts at restoring New Testament Christianity, where they've gone, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. So I think we've got to be aware of that history. Hopefully that responded to your question in some way.
Mm-hmm. Everyone sort of feel the same way about that?
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think but sometimes we feel maybe, I don't know if it's true, but maybe we can feel awkward to have a class just on history because we have to, I don't know, it's not directly linked to the Bible. We just want to focus on New Testament, but we have all these centuries to talk about. But, I don't know all the courses in the world on theology, but I'm pretty sure all of them have at least one history of Christianity class. So we shouldn't feel too awkward to teach that to the church. Probably not, I don't know if it's in a Sunday morning setting or like a service, but in other forms. But it is important to, like you said, teach about history.
I think that's a great question, Mati. And one of the reasons why I am grateful for advanced theological training is because I got access to books that helped me to understand my history even prior to Barton Stone and the Campbells in the 1800s, just the history from Scotland. I was just so grateful for the training that I've been able to receive. I think part of sort of immersing myself in the history of our extended movement is also seeing patterns and being able to see how those patterns repeated themselves in our beginning. We are not unique. The fracturing is in our DNA. And so very similar to the ways in which we sort of need to heal from generational trauma and make peace with the past. Personally, I would love to see more unity amongst all the different sects of the mainline, as we call it, Churches of Christ. And so and I think this group is really poised to sort of be at the tipping point of that, in intellectual humility, in being aware of our past. And so I do see us going in that direction, and I see this group as leading the way towards that. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Dima?
Thank you. I have a question about the future a little bit. Do you know what's going to be? No. So last year, when the conference came to its end, we were sitting in a circle in this hall and talking about the development of the teaching ministry, especially in Europe and in Eastern Europe in particular, and just in general. This is not Eastern Europe, but the question is, do you think it can be possible to create some system in the future where, because teachers have their own specializations, right? They like research their topics and stuff, and they are able to teach on certain topics like better. So it's a little bit, it reminds me of the doctors that have their specialization. If you need to see a doctor, you just go to the website, you find the free time when doctor is available, you set the appointment, and then you go and see the doctor, basically. So maybe the system like that would work in the future, because seeing the lessons online is great, obviously, but I think it's even better, maybe I'm a little boomer in that, face-to-face meetings when teachers can answer questions on the spot. And it's great to have teachers and develop teachers ministry in the churches, obviously, but there are some churches like ours, for example, that cannot afford to have teachers ministry. So just to have this network of teachers with their like specializations and maybe even available times when they're free, and you can just reserve the time for the teacher to come to your church. You know, you understand, you pay for their travel and stuff, but just to, you know, teach, because I think the churches have the need in that thing. So maybe it would be great to create such a hub.
Yeah, I could say something on that. We are in the process of reorganizing things with a teacher service team, and I'm really grateful for just all the conversations that's been put into that. So far, we've identified 7 regions all over the world, and of course that's flexible, but we're hoping to really build that network, as you've mentioned. Another thing that we're working on is a database for all the teachers, at least appointed teachers. Steve Staden did a lot of work already identifying the names of all these teachers all over the world who have been recognized. The next step is to place them in some sort of database with their strong suits. So yeah, watch out for that.
Well, we just need to set up a calendar. You know, I know I'm not saying that right, but set up an appointment schedule where I'll give so many office hours a week for people from around the world that want to call in and get mentored or whatever. I think that's a great idea. Yep. Right, you know, it's new to me, but I think it'd be fun. And the other thing I wanted to say, I'm really excited you guys want to be a part of Stone Campbell too. I was eager to hear the answer to that. That's good. It's healthy. It keeps our identity. It keeps a history. The other thing is, I think we've really let down as far as reaching out to the next generation as far as teachers go, and so we need to figure it out. So any of you that want to be on a teacher service team, next generation service team, see me, and I'll get a list of names and we'll work on that, because I think that's a great idea. I'm a little bit convicted because Gordon Ferguson had taught at a seminary and for years, and then he came over to our movement and we worked together. He invited me to be a co-evangelist with him in San Diego, and he was like 45 and I was 28. And we split the pulpit. He preached one Sunday, I preached the next. He led a meeting, I led a meeting. It was a total partnership. And I look back on that now, and Gordon and I haven't really talked about that much, but that's a great example. He's a great example of bridging this next generation thing. I mean, to trust me to preach instead of him. I mean, that had a lot of courage, you know. And I mean, I asked, I said, Gordon, why'd you do that? He said, well, I don't know. So we've let you down, but just come and see me and I'll put your name on a list.
The other thing that I would also advocate is, if you are interested in pursuing advanced theological or ministry studies, a few of us are part of the Disciple Center for Education, and which is amazing. I'm so grateful for the men and women who fund that. But that is an organization that's funded by brothers and sisters within our fellowship of churches, and they offer scholarships for school. And so if that's something that you're interested in, I don't know when the next round of application would be. Mati might know more than me. But one of the things on that committee is that we represent and reflect sort of a spectrum of theological and religious studies interests. So for instance, I know Mati's specialty is ethics, Christian ethics and finance. And Carlos is philosophy. My focus is cultural historical work, and I'm specifically looking at that through the lens of gender. And I also do comparative work, so Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And Hannah D'Souza is focused on Christian literature. And TJ does Old Testament theology. So we have a good spread, and one of the things that we know is as much as our programs will have us specialize, because we are at the tip of the spear for our church, we still have to be generalists. And so the hope is that for generations to come, we'll create a program and a path where people can really specialize. But we don't have that privilege as sort of some of the first people to be involved in something like this. And so that's the hope, is that we need to stay pretty general in our work with the church. But hopefully one day there can be others who can totally specialize and offer that sort of specialty service to the church. So it's the Disciples Center for Education.
Okay, go ahead.
Dual question here intertwined. One is online media have their place. It's nicer, for my taste, to have physical meetings. Now the question is, we all live in cities that are pretty big, most of us at least. So going somewhere, especially with public transportation as a young person, takes you, let's say, 45 minutes, back another 45 minutes. If you have a 2-minute meeting, that takes a lot of time, and many of the Gen Zs, as well as my generation, Gen X, feels overwhelmed from what I pick up. So that's the first question, how do we get them, and also the Gen X and Gen Ys, to come to physical meetings? So we've tried one in Berlin, which we entitled Overcoming Overwhelmedness, to find something that would connect to their lives rather than saying the topics of Genesis. So that's the one, and the other's connected to that, which is attention span. Some of you suggested, having these bullet type things in like podcasts or something. Now teaching is something which just requires time, because it requires deeper understanding, rather than saying, here's an inspirational scripture for you to consume in your 40-second rhythm. So how can we do that? I know Bible Project, I admire that, it's great. But it has its place, definitely, but how can we get the attention span that's long enough?
Opinion might be unpopular, but I'm not sure. Well, there are many. I think there is a problem at times with methodology. What I've noticed is many teachers, preachers in general, is that the longer they have been teaching or preaching, they develop vices or bad habits. For example, spending on the introduction 10 minutes, and or giving too many examples, and so they become less disciplined as they are more occupied and more responsibilities, and they also are confident in the way they teach because they've been doing very long. But I would say that it's very healthy for many preachers and teachers to read from time to time methodology, or pedagogy. Yeah, I guess because in my secular job, I was also a teacher, and so I'm not only interested about the content of my students that they need to learn, but how they learn, and how they learn faster, and how they learn being engaged, and so that I would say that is a problem. I would say that many times we don't, as speakers, especially those that teach very frequently, I think that sometimes we think the Bible, and we forget about methodology or public speaking skills, which maybe they are not good. Maybe you are boring to be listened to. And this, I know it sounds harsh, but the funny part is that we see in class and we see in sermons, all of a sudden somebody speaks and you remember that sermon really well, and it's like, wow. And whenever this person speaks, it's like, for some reason, it says the same thing, but doesn't say the same thing. And then you have another teacher or teacher in school, and you know you all have had those teachers that you don't want to go to class. Yeah. And so I'm hesitant to accept the premise that is about this attention span. I'm going to talk about that now. But I would say that sometimes the methodology or our abilities as speakers need to improve. Right? Maybe we could use objects. Maybe we can be more dynamics. Maybe we could be asking questions and asking open questions. I don't know. I think we need to be curious in the way we teach and innovate. You know what I mean? And just pay attention to what type of people Gen Zers and millennials are listening to. Because I know many of them that they listen to 2-hour podcasts and they are super intrigued about what a philosopher or I don't know, like a thinker that is secular has to say. But not so much the preacher. And I think that that's tough on us. But we need to face the problem, right there and say, what can I improve and take ownership? But I also believe that we need to tell younger people that, hey, it's hard work to study and research. There's no shortcuts in life. Like, it's just the nature of growing. And I do believe, and hopefully in the future I'm able to write this book, but I would like to, I think that the relationship between being overstimulated by social media, dopamine hits, and all of this in our brain chemistry is giving us a harder time sitting still and being quiet and experience stillness with cutting our quiet times. And we are not capable of meditating because we are so nervous because we want to be entertained all the time. And our theology many times comes from passive consumption of podcasts and don't chew the gum that other people are chewing. Like, chew and do the digestion yourself. That's what I tell younger people. And they laugh because they're like, oh, this is unpopular because people are soft on them many times. But I would say no. We need to say this is hard work and you need to embrace to some degree some version of monastic life. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, well, two things. I think for those of us who have some programs going on right now, we need to streamline. And one of the things that we've tried to do is streamline with regard to how we communicate our lessons. So one of the things that we've tried to do with some of our speakers is to help them filter their material with 3 things: what, so what, now what. And if they can break it down to those 3 things, what are you really trying to say, bro? And why is this relevant? So what? And what is the action you're asking for? So what, so what, and now what? I think it'll be easier for people to take this material in, and especially in a world with TED Talks, that's really important. Another thing is, we talked about flexibility earlier. Today's communication systems have taken to audience-centered teaching. And so we want to cater more to the audience, not so much the expertise of the teacher, but what is needed by the audience at that time. One phenomenon that has come up in recent years is what's known as learner control. And that has to do with the students being able to have greater control of the pace, amount of information, schedule, whatnot. And so we're seeing younger people now desiring for greater learner control. So that's something that you might want to explore in your teaching system.
I think it's a great question. And I would say the answer is a hybrid. That you need to have some face-to-face, but we can go Zoom, we can go technology. I mean, we've seen that in the pandemic, and the ship has sailed. I mean, everybody's familiar with Zoom. Everybody can use it, and this transportation and everything, it's a big issue getting around and that kind of thing. But you also got to feel a part of a group and feel some membership. And so, in all the school I've been in, most of it was face to face. Some of it was only online, and then some of it was hybrid. I hated the just online. I really liked the hybrid, the mix. And so, but I prefer face-to-face, but when you can't have it, at least have hybrid. The thing about attention span and all that, that ship sailed too, in the sense of, there's research. Bayham and Carr and some others have written some great books about attention span and about what video games and what this constant stimulation and information overload has done to the brain and how it's affected people. But you can't fight it. If you go back over history, when they went from oral tradition to written tradition, people fought that. They didn't want to give up the oral tradition. There's a strength in being able to memorize and poetry and all that kind of thing. We did lose something when we went to print. We're losing something going from print to electronic. And so we need to try to encourage people to keep a hold of the good all the way through, not just make it one or the other or pit things against each other or even pit generations against each other. We can do both. And basically, with almost any audience, but especially a younger audience, you're going to have to make a move every 10 minutes, sometimes 5. And if you think that way when you preach, when you think that way when you teach, you need a different pedagogy. You got to do a different move. And when I led a group for 90 minutes of drug-addicted, convicted, 3-time felon kids, 15 of them, for 4 months at a time, and if I didn't make my moves, I lost control of that group. You had a video, you played music, you had lyrics, you had question and response. I mean, it took more preparation than that to do that 90 minutes than the rest of the week. So anyway, that's my answer.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I think I have a question about age. But if you are already 35 and you didn't grow up in church and you sort of got baptized when you were 24, which is sort of already old for campus somehow, are we skipping some generation already? And if right now, I am speaking in I mode because I can't do this any other way in English. And if right now I'm thinking, maybe I want to do this, what you are offering to the 20 years old. Okay, we are talking in 35, but actually on staff, in Rolan, there was 27, 24, 23. That's are the ages, but 35, 37, 41, 42. If I think I want to do or learn something for the church, just as a shepherd, what do I have to do? Go to a school to learn religion or maybe IT skills? I already have an education. I have a job, but I'm a disciple. I want to be a better disciple. What are the suggestions? You are teachers. Maybe you can suggest something.
No, I'll let my fellow panelists do suggestions. I just want to thank you for your question. And I totally agree. Amen. And continue to share that. Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes we talk about, we do general assumptions because of the way things are, but your voice needs to be heard. And yeah, so, but I do think that anything that, I don't know, there's not necessarily, you don't need to be 25 to do something if you're 35, 45. I don't think there's an age limit to start university studies when you apply. I don't know, so I think continue to persevere, and may God bless you. But some suggestions from my panelists.
Maybe not suggestion, but I love your heart. That's such a beautiful Christ-like heart to have. And I can share about my life personally. I graduated from undergrad in 2001 or 2. And I entered a master's program in 2016. I was 36, 35 when I entered. And I would say part of why I'm very passionate about teaching, why I'm very passionate about women teaching, was because for years I felt like I couldn't. I felt like there was a cap to what I could do. There was a disconnect between the community, the faith community that I was a part of, and the ways in which the Spirit was moving inside of me. And so it got to a place where I was like, I can't keep this in anymore. And perhaps I won't be supported in this way by people, but God's going to have to support me in this because there's no other path. I was a full-time minister, and really there was no place for me to go as a single woman without a husband in the full-time ministry. And so I think in a lot of ways that was really good for me, because then it clarified for me, this is my path. This is where I need to go. And so it's a lot of wrestling. Whatever you choose to do, you will be a pioneer, but you will also be blazing a path for so many other men and women. And so I hope that my story will help you, however God is moving in your heart, to take a step in whatever direction.
Can I make a comment? I just wanted to say the topic of next gen. Boy, I remember when we first really labeled that and started to talk about it. Immediately, people are like, "Well, who's next gen? Who is this?" And we had within our movement, I would say, people between the age of 35 and 45 a few years ago who are like, "What about us?" Because they felt like, and I think we have to be careful. Maybe as a baby boomer, forgive my generation, I think we've needed to kind of, like things have changed so quickly and they are increasing in speed that we're looking back at generational differences. To be honest, what's happening now in 30 years used to take a century. So the other generation was dead already. I think I prefer the term multi-generational church, without trying to overanalyze the compartments, but really emphasize that we've got to learn to listen to each other and learn from each other. And because sadly, and language is important, language can make someone feel left out. And so, I apologize for that. If language is making someone feel left out, that's not the intention, but we have to start somewhere and frame it somehow. But please hear that this is not intended to make someone left out. It's actually trying to understand the differences in a time when society has changed just drastically over time and is still accelerating. Just a little thought, okay.
You know, just to add a couple of brief points to that. Now, I don't know your personal situation or anything, so I couldn't even begin to give specific advice, but I think one thing that has helped me, or two things rather, are whatever your path of study is in the future, if you decide to pursue a path of study, say at a university level or anything like that, it really ought to grow out of, or I've found that what I've done is tried to make it grow out of my personal pursuit of God in my own study, my own personal daily study of the scriptures, my own study of church history, my own study of early Christianity, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that when when we already have a solid daily devotional time with God, when we're already pursuing things on our own, then it starts to become, logical to perhaps add something to that might cost us something in terms of time and money. But I believe it starts on a personal, individual level, and that nobody needs to appoint anybody to do that. We can all start doing that. In fact, I believe we all should to a degree. The second thing that's helped me is, and I think this actually gets to a few different questions of how we can serve the next generation. And it's basically finding somebody to walk with in the faith whom you can mentor, whom you can train, or whom you can at least be a close friend to in the faith. And, I don't want to even begin to get in front of other people and start teaching them if I can't, A, teach myself, which was kind of my first point, but B, teach somebody else on an individual level. If I can't teach somebody else individually, be it a younger Christian or in a Bible study, then I really shouldn't even begin to think about getting in front of a whole group of people. And so one of the most rewarding things for me has been being a mentor to many teenagers and young Christians and seeing their development in the faith, seeing them get married, sometimes even doing the wedding, for example. I mean, that has been one of the most rewarding things for me, seeing that development. And that, for me, I was interested in that before I ever got interested in talking in front of other people. To me, that's kind of the bread and butter of what it means to teach, is on an individual level, if that makes sense.
I'm going to take a couple here from the from the other audience, the online audience. In our country, there are no teachers. We have 20 years of practice in teaching and service, but no recognized ministry. Now the talk is about the youth. We are older and, in quotation marks, out of the focus. How could we learn from recognized teachers abroad while being where we are? Panel?
Well, this ties into what I was hoping to get to say. I've got some exciting news. The teacher service team is working on an ICOC university that will be online around the world. And we see this as a long-term vision, but with so many more and more educated people, we're going to be able to fill those slots of teachers. And because of technology, we're going to be able to reach any and everybody online. And right now, we have sort of that going on with Rocky Mountain School of Ministry and Theology. Most of the students are not American. The American students are going to Christian universities to get an accredited degree. And this isn't accredited yet, but we're working on trying to get an accreditation. And it may be a collaboration, but it will also possibly and probably be just something that we do because we have enough educated people to form our own university. So, that I think that's exciting, and that's going to be able to provide education and instruction everywhere in the world. So, did that answer the question?
Yeah, let me...
I think the question was also about, the person was expressing that they feel like they've served for many years and haven't been recognized, and now the focus is on the next generation and they haven't been recognized.
Yeah, I think it actually, it's kind of a question that's in the air here.
Yeah.
How do we keep the focus so that everyone feels like there's something important going on in their stage of life where they're at? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully the panel and the class didn't seem like we were saying bye-bye, let us come, But we need a relationship, and the mentorship and all that we've talked about hopefully helps that. So I'm not sure, but I don't think we're saying goodbye to the older generation. We won't need both.
No.
Yeah. And so I think there's probably, through that question, a need for recognition. So that's a work to be done among churches to maybe recognize what's been done. But hopefully we don't seem like we know better than the older generation. Obviously not. We need each other.
I think part of this is going to be wherever you are locally, this is definitely a plea to make to your local leadership. Can we bring in more people from the outside? Because they're looking for more outside exposure. Obviously, it's not going to work that a teacher decides, oh, I'm going to come to your church. I'm speaking to the people online now. There's need to be an invitation to come. And so, in some ways, this question has a little bit back on the local situation and making that initiative for that kind of possibility.
I think also what would be helpful for local churches is to not think in a binary way, like either 0 or 1. Either you are not a teacher or you are like an appointed teacher with a full-time salary. I think that we need to be more flexible in the way we are defining teachers and different capacities and different degrees. And I think that if they have the desire, then they probably are doing already the work. And so maybe talking to the local leadership to recognize who is doing that, and also teachers who are appointed as teachers provide feedback, or that there can be a community would be something nice. Because also local churches isolated and somebody teaching or acting in the role of teaching the congregation could be dangerous without feedback, because then one person has the prominent role of influencing the whole congregation. And I've seen that going really bad. That happened to Madrid to some degree. So that's why I'm saying that. And I'm going to throw this out there for the people in charge, you and Gregg. I think it would be nice to come up with a model of, so I'm going to give this example. For example, imagine that all the Spanish-speaking churches, South America, Spain, they say, okay, we're going to make this X amount of contribution per year, and there is a common, how do you say, fondo, like a fund or something like that. No, like where the money is going. Yeah, a fund. And then that fund is managed by the service team or whoever is appointed, and then that person sends teachers to South America, for example, to start rotating in different churches and provide this type of feedback and connection and all of and being aware. Doing the same thing with the English-speaking world. And so doing something like that might be important, right? Because local churches don't have enough money to pay a full-time, always on staff, but maybe they have enough money to contribute for a teacher to come, I don't know, every 3 months and teach on relevant topics that the church needs. And so the teacher has enough time to prepare a lesson on the Holy Spirit, and then the connections are formed, and it's good practice also for other teachers learning how to teach. So that's
Yeah, to add to that, we definitely need to recognize things that have been done before. We definitely need to be sensitive to how people have given so much time, effort, energy, and in some places we just really need to be humble, apologize, and do a better job at it. But moving forward, I think what the Holy Spirit would want is a fulfillment of Ephesians 4:11 and following, which is, as we talked about, I talked about briefly with Doug yesterday, the breadth of the teaching ministry. It's broad. It's not just appointing someone to have a title, but the teaching function has to be carried out at so many different levels. And just like not everyone will become or be appointed evangelist, the evangelism function has to happen at different levels in the church. And not everyone will be appointed shepherd. However, the shepherding function has to be carried out on various levels of the church. And we need to feel great about that. And I think that collaboration for at least those 3 functions, evangelism, shepherding, and teaching, if you can make that happen, it'll be a great collaboration and an appreciation of the Holy Spirit's giftedness.
I want to come back to something Andy said. He said that things have moved quickly. Generations used to be defined with 40 years. Now they're being defined 15 years. And so we've sort of skipped through a few generations here real quickly. It was Boomer, and then it was Millennium, and Gen Z, and now which is Gen Zoomer, and then it's Alpha. And, that's 3 generations that used to just be one. The whole 20th century, there were only 2. And now already, the last part of the 20th century and now the beginning, we're running through 3. So let's be patient and for gracious towards one another. No one should have been overlooked, but we really blurred through a few years here. Is the only thing I'm saying. I'm trying to keep up. You know, my kids, I even ask them, "Are you millennial or what are you?" So.
That way. Yeah, I just wanted to add also for those online listening, and it kind of coincides. Last year at this conference, this really was our theme, the breadth of the teaching ministry and what does that look like. And I'd encourage you to go, there's some online resources if you go to the site of this conference, and you can listen to lessons about the breadth of the teaching ministry and how it has so many different possibilities. Thank you. Okay.
My question, we live in a very secular world, and we're in a bubble here, talking about studying theology and things like that. And with respect to the younger generations, one of the things that we hear is that issues like social justice, ecology, and I could go on, are really, really important. And I think my question would be, to what extent do you believe teaching needs to help the church be more pertinent on those issues, and how would you suggest that plays out? You know, they're kind of topics we haven't spent a lot of time talking about here, but I think outside of these 4 walls, there are topics that people care a great deal about. And if we're trying to attract to secular world of Christianity, obviously their topics need to be our topics. I don't know what your thinking is about that one.
I think he's asking you younger guy.
Yeah, I think talking to my peers, what I notice is that many times there is a separation between what they believe theologically, I mean, according to the revelation of the Bible, and what they believe rationally, like with natural reason, like being able to, oh, that makes sense. And so I think that like I would say that in millennials and Gen Zers, the space is just growing and growing and growing. And it's not that they don't understand the revelation from the Bible. They do. They just don't like it. They just don't, it doesn't make sense to their intellectual sensitivity. And so we need to find a way, I think, as teachers, to be able to bridge that gap between what they accept from the revelation of the Bible and what they believe rationally. And so that's why I think, and this is a call for future Christian philosophers, by the way, is that we need to be able to put forward a Christian worldview that is not just reduced to baptism, coming to church, and things like that. Because I do believe that what I notice in the difference in generations is the sensitivity towards certain moral topics. And you guys are feeling it because they ask you questions and you are like, why are you asking this? Now gender is being, refuted. And so now people don't know what to make of that. And so I think that, and the responses that many millennials and Gen Zers are hearing from church are very disappointing because they are very shallow in the surface. And it makes sense because older generations are not trained in these fields to understand these problems and then give a theological response that is mixed with an interdisciplinary approach from other fields to understand that. And so I believe this is a huge problem. I think that the problem with secularization in our church and people leaving is usually because of this discrepancy between what they accept theologically and what they believe rationally. That makes sense. And I think that the more we put forward a harmony between these two, it will be better, I think, and we will have stronger Christians that are proud of their Bible, I would say. So, yeah.
What I would add to what you just said is that our rationale is also trained and influenced by our culture and by the zeitgeist, right? And so I do think that the issues of social justice that we see in our culture today I don't think it's new. I think these have always been things that have existed, and there have been ones of us in the church for whom these have been very important, and they've mattered quite a bit. I think now it's become an issue that is irrefutable, and it's in our face. And so for me, as I see it, we are in a place where we just have not given thought to the ways in which our theology is lived out in real life, in the world outside the bubble of our sphere and our fellowship. And so I think a way in which to begin to reduce that gap between our rationality and our theology is really to be like Jesus. And for Jesus, he was always trying to get at the heart, right? He always went someplace that was like, you had to go there, didn't you? You know? And so for me, I'll tell you, for me, how I approach just where our cultural moment is to look at what are the hurts, what are the pains that we're seeing, give it the biblical name, right? And how does Jesus handle? How did Jesus treat those things, right? Jesus came and he worked with the peoples on the margins. And so many communities feel marginalized. That's a painful place to be when an intrinsic part of our human experience is feeling and needing to feel like I belong. And so when you've lived on the margins for quite a bit, it messes you up. And so giving spiritual names, biblical names to the things that people feel, I think it's really important to the experiences that people feel. And I think we're in this moment. It's really good for us. It's really calling us to repent of some really awful things in our character, our collective characters. It's calling us to not sway on things that we just don't have the right to change because God says this, right? But it's also calling us to think more creatively and more deeply, which means we have to think with the Spirit. And as a movement that loves certainty and certitude, it says it in the Word. It's so good because now, all right, Holy Spirit, where are we going? I don't see it, but lead me. And so I don't know if that helps or if it even addresses the question you had in mind, but that was my first initial thought.
Yeah, it's a great question. Just add a little bit here. The world is increasingly becoming more secular, and we live in a postmodern world. But I do think that if we study our Bibles and study the culture, there are many ways to engage contemporary culture. I think one of the ways to connect with postmodern society is through the concept of story. And the Bible is a story. There's a story unfolding, many stories, but of course, the greater overarching story. And I would say that if we are able to effectively unpack the story of the Bible and the various stories in the Bible, we can connect with society in really profound ways. For example, I talk about this in my book on Deuteronomy, Remember the Lord. Deuteronomy is actually a social commentary. It goes against ancient Near Eastern culture of the time. If you compare what Deuteronomy is teaching, even though it has the same form as ancient Hittite treaties or the Code of Hammurabi, it elevates social justice to a totally different level. And so what it does is it's shifting, it's It's a radical shout against the prevailing culture of the time, and it elevates the rights of the individual like nothing compared to the culture of the time. So if we could unpack that, connect with people, do it in a way that younger people understand, then you'll see the Bible is relevant, and it's actually revolutionary, and that is a message we can carry to the nations.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, so much could be said on this subject, right? I mean, we have a difficult job as a church, as Christians. Jesus talks about a narrow path that we have to walk. And you can see that on the one side, you've got one subset of the world population, and then on the other side, you've got another subset, and somehow we've got to walk Christ's path, regardless of whether one half of the world is saying one thing and the other half is saying the other. We've got to follow the narrow path, which is challenging. But I think the way that we do that, especially as teachers, is that we have to be very good at understanding both sides of every argument. So we need to be very good at understanding what we mean by social justice and what one group means and another group might not mean, right? There are different definitions of these things. What's the difference between equality and equity, for example? We need to be very good at understanding these kind of things if we're going to engage with them. So I think we really need to educate ourselves. And we need to educate ourselves by listening both to the people we agree with or we're inclined to agree with and the people that we're not going to. Or that we don't know. You don't know until you look into it who you're going to agree with, I mean to say. But I would say that it's interesting. I hear from a lot of different people, and it may surprise you to learn that there are a number of young people, both young men and young women, who seem to be more concerned, from what I'm hearing, with drifting in too far of a liberal direction. Now, we all come from different places. The word liberal versus conservative is these are difficult words to use because people mean different things when they say them. But what I often hear are things like, is our church going to go in a direction where a generation from now, we're going to accept same-sex marriage, for example, in the church? Now, that seems crazy to us right now. I think it seems crazy to us. But there are people that are worried that, hey, we've seen denomination after denomination, church movement after church movement start to make this turn where, you kind of see the gradual, it's a slippery slope, right? You see that gradual progression. What are we doing to make sure that we're somehow dealing with these issues, which are so important? We have to deal with all of them. Yet, we've held to the standard. Now, these aren't easy questions to answer, but I'll just say that I think sometimes the older generation, however we want to define that, has sort of this idea that all the young people are just completely focused on X, Y, or Z, but it's really more complicated than that. And I would say I hear from a lot of people, especially people who've grown up in the church as well as people who haven't grown up in the church, from the younger generation, both men and women, who want to make sure that we as a church are holding to something solid, something that we can give to our children in the next generation, and that isn't going to be a totally different church in a way that we wouldn't want it to be a totally different church. Now, the challenge with this is there are two kinds of change: good change and bad change. Change is needed, but it takes incredible wisdom, and we still need the leadership, and we still need the direction of the older generation to see us through this next passage in our church. We're not quite ready for you to just hand the baton off to us entirely yet. Kind of like a relay race, you got to run with that person a little bit before handing off the baton. When that thing gets dropped, that's kind of rough. And what I think that I can only speak for myself, but I think I know a number of people who want to work with the older generation so that we don't fumble this one. These issues of social justice, etc., these are complex and important issues, but we don't want to fumble it. We don't want to just have a baton thrown to us. It's time for me to retire now, guys. You take this thing. No. We need to work together so that we can complete this race together. Yeah.
Amen. Okay, I have one more question from online. What could we do to help our leaders have faith and practically plan to get our own teachers in our countries? We get asked this, these are the kind of questions we get often at the teachers' conference. Can you help me with my leader understand something? They seem to come in this way. I think always afraid of a question that sort of makes it sound like someone that we're not here to defend themselves isn't doing something that they should do. But I think the thing is, I think just encouraging, I think congregations have to make sure their voice is being heard by their leaderships. And, there's a great example. The widow just kept asking until she got what she asked for. So don't give up. But any other thoughts about this? How do we help our leaders have faith and practically plan to get our own teachers in our country?
Well, it came up in some of the discussion in different parts of the last couple of days. This sometimes disconnect between the church leadership and the teaching ministry or teachers. And being somebody that has been in church leadership for 40 years and now been a teacher, I thought all that time, but officially for about the last 10, 15 years, I'm an official teacher. I wear both hats all the time, and I'm in both camps. And I guess my heart aches for there not to be any differentiation, that we develop relationships, and it all has to come back down to interpersonal relationships, that we've got to be so persistent that, this is such an important ministry that we keep looking for the way to convince somebody if they're not convinced of how important it is, and we prepare some stuff, prepare some curriculum, and bring it as a gift. Hey, can you do anything with this? Can we use this? Can we implement this? I just think I've seen too much when people don't get a first positive response to sort of pull back and to retreat. And I would say that's when you just got to push harder forward and keep working at the relationship and convincing people. And ministry should be about persuasion. You just persuade each other. And as a church leader, I'll just tell you, if you're a squeaky wheel, I'm going to want to put some oil on it, all right? I'm going to want to have you quit squeaking at me, and I'm going to cave in. I mean, I'm a strong-willed guy, but I will cave in. And you're making more progress than you think when you ask, and so keep asking, because this is of God. And the question specifically was, how do we build faith? Well, we build faith through Scripture. And what Scriptures? The promises of God. When you claim the promises of God, you pray the promises of God, you expect the promises of God, they'll come true, and your faith grows. And so I just direct people towards the promises. But I want to hear Roland's sermon. No, you get excited.
Well, I wanted to ask Gregg, so if I go to my church leader, hey, I really think we should get a teaching ministry, and they say, no, I don't think we should get a teaching ministry. For me, I would be like, okay, how can you model the person? Like, what does persistency look like? Do you argue? Like,
okay, let's do it. So I'll be the requester, and you be the church leader that rejects me.
We said live demo.
This wasn't planned.
So okay. I was hoping we could.
I'll be the church. Okay.
Okay, I was hoping that we could start a teaching ministry. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that's the need right now. I think we have our teaching needs met.
Can you elaborate on that? How are they being met?
So I teach, And we have the other region leaders. We have our teen minister, our campus minister. And these are people who are committed to preaching and teaching. So I think that's good. That's a good place to be.
Well, I guess what I'm seeing in my experience in the church is there seems to be a lack of really basic understanding and basic conviction about things. How could we improve that? I'm just going to keep putting it back on you. I'll just tell you my strategy. And I'm going to put it back on them, and I'm going to ask nice, open-ended questions to keep putting it back on them. So we don't have to model it.
Right.
I already said what we're going to do.
But no, the reason why I asked that is because a lot of times in panels like these, right, we get wonderful pieces of advice like that. But for me, I'm like, no, if my church leader tells me no, I'm going to be like, okay, I trust you. You have a handle on the church. And so to hear that and to witness that example of if there's a need that you're seeing, really being able to advocate for the need. I think that's what I really appreciated in that example. So,
and I'm not afraid to go over people's heads. You know, I mean, all of us we don't have a strict hierarchy anymore, but we have a cooperative hierarchy. And I don't know what region of the country you're in, but I know all the regional family chairmen, and some of them are incredible teachers and really believe in the teaching. And so if you sort of drop a hint, you know, and you can do it without trying to, you're trying to do a good thing, and people are wise, but I just think I'm going to keep advocating, and if they keep shutting me down, then I'm going to go somewhere. And even pull Valder into it. Everybody listens to Valder in the whole kingdom, you know? I mean, John Oakes will come. He'll pay his own way to come to your church and teach, and he's so amazing. He'll blow people away. And he'll come for free. So just, you invite John, and he'll show up. You know, I mean, I'll give you more specific if you tell me more specific, but I better leave it there.
Okay, we have time for one more question. We'll take the young man at the back.
First of all, thank you everybody for your sermons and lessons. They've been really inspiring. But I guess as a Gen Z person, what are some of your tips or advice, or what do you expect of us to help bridge this gap between generations? How can we also help?
Let me say something great about Gen Z. I've been working with a Gen Z intern for the last 2 years, and this is an idea for the rest of the church leaders and that kind of thing. You can get interns that are still in school and they want to graduate in ministry, and they're going to a Christian school online, so they can be anywhere in the world. So this guy came to us after his sophomore year, and he's taken his last 2 years as an intern at our church, and he graduated from a school in Florida. We're in California, and he did it all online, and he just graduated. And so that the Gen Z generation wants to get their hands dirty and jump right in. They don't even want to have necessarily wait till they graduate. And this guy is a brilliant Greek scholar. He has learned Greek. He reads from the Greek New Testament. And so I'd say I just want us to compliment. We've almost painted them as this issue to figure out. But they're really tremendous people. This guy is so fruitful. About every month, someone's becoming Christian. And we only have a junior college. We don't have a 4-year school. And he's built an incredible campus ministry. So I love Gen Z. I want that to be clear. And I think all of us need to continue to train and reach out. I just finished working with a millennial guy that you're going to hear his name. He's one of the greatest speakers in our movement right now. He's not even 30 years old, and he's a black brother. and his wife grew up in the most difficult parts of Los Angeles, and so they have a tremendous perspective. But I think all of us older people have to constantly be discipling or mentoring and training the next generation. So now I went from a millennial, now I got a Gen Z, and I guess we'll go alpha next. So
Yeah, can I just,
Sure,
sorry, Rolan. I work in a high school, so I work with Gen Zers. And sometimes when I say to other people that I'm a high school teacher, they think, oh, how are the kids now? They're all terrible. And I don't really like to hear that because I agree with what you just said. Gen Z is also great and a mix of good and bad people, but I think there's also sometimes, I go back to what we talked about social media, like, we need to get to their level, but if I talk to someone from Gen Z, Gen Z, it's okay to be different. That's what Jesus was, and to be, for example, social media. We don't have to all be on social media to all consume the same way. You can be an example to your peers as someone who is disciplined, who has a long attention span, we don't have to be to follow the mindset of our generation. Just because we're Gen Z, we have to be like all Gen Zs. No, you can be an example, and that's what Christ is calling us to do, to be different, to be countercultural as well. So I just wanted to say that little part about that. Yes, there is a Gen Z culture, but it's okay to go against the culture. It's probably better, biblical. So for you, just be an example and continue to work. And there's plenty of opportunities for you, I think. And for the people who are not Gen Z, the Gen Z is not a terrible generation. They're great people.
Yeah, real quick, they love getting involved. So when I work with millennials and Gen Z, I ask them, what are the needs that you see? And just, in a very humble, simple way, what are the needs you see in the church? What do we need to work on? And where can you contribute? Another angle you could approach with is fulfilling the one another scriptures. I believe the healthiest churches are those that organically fulfill the one another scriptures. And so if you look at the one another scriptures, reflect on them, I'm sure Gen Z or millennials, individuals will find ways by which they can contribute to that, the fulfillment of those one another scriptures.
Great. Well, thank you. Let's give it up for our panelists.
Thank you guys so much. It has been a great day. I have a couple of announcements before we end. First, we have Next Gen Fellowship event that begins at 17:30. So it's in 25 minutes. And you all meet downstairs at lobby. And Jacob, could you please stand up? Jacob is there. So Jacob will gather you up, and then you have a short walk in the old town, and then you have food and fellowship and so on. So it's for everyone who's under 35. Secondly, tomorrow we start here 9:30. Everyone who's interested, we have open discussion about teaching ministries in Europe. And Danny Fleming will lead this discussion. It's not going to be in this hall. It's going to be a hall just over there. It's called Northern European Hall. But it's here in this building just across this small coffee break place here. 9:30 tomorrow morning. We have church service tomorrow. It's going to be at 12 o'clock. It's not going to be here. So it's in our church building where we have church services. It's at Ravala 8. It's about 12 minutes, that direction. You can check it out on your mobile phone, if you have Google Maps, if you are a boomer with old phone with the buttons, just try to find someone who helps you to get there. Or you can get to the first floor and get a map from the reception and ask you want to go to Ravala 8. It's here on your schedule. You can see the address there. So at 12 o'clock, we have church service. Please be there early so you can find your seat, and it's going to be great. So for everybody who's participating at the meeting, who's preaching or worshiping, we have pre-meeting at Travel 8, 11:45. So please be there 15 minutes early on backstage. Worshippers can practice starting from 11 o'clock. So, and on Sunday, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, everyone who's interested can join guided tour in the Old Town. So we have 11 people signed up. It costs 20 euros. So if you go there, just take money with you and we collect it just there at 2 o'clock. I'll be there. I'll connect you with the guide. It's going to be 2 o'clock at the same place where we have, it starts at the same place where we have the church service. So guys, thank you so much for today. See you all tomorrow.